Imagine getting up every day full of energy as if you were in your 20s again. What would that be like? What would it be worth to you? What is your health worth to you? Think about it. Your health isn't everything, but without it, everything else is nothing. And yet, too many of us are taking it for granted until something goes wrong. And no one wakes up hoping to be diagnosed with a disease or chronic illness. And yet, we've never been taught how to be proactive in our health through our school or public health. As a registered health coach and integrative health practitioner, I believe it's time this information is made available to everyone. Combining new knowledge around your health and the ability to do my functional medicine lab tests in the comfort of your own home will allow you to optimize your health for today and all your tomorrows. Don't wait for your wake-up call. Welcome back to another episode of the Don't Wait for Your Wake-Up Call podcast. I am here with David Key and so excited to have you on the show. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you. And I'm honored that you've invited me here, Melissa. I'm so looking forward to our conversation. I really am, honestly. It's going to
Me
be
too.
great.
And before we dive in, I just want to read a little bit of your bio here and introduce you to the audience. And then I'm going to have you share your story. And of course, we only met in person recently, like less than 2 months ago. And you as Billy's and my mentor in our work. And so, of course, we want to share our learnings from you with my audience because they are so powerful and our thoughts literally create our life. So, David Key is the best-selling author, and he's an award-winning coach, principles teacher, NLP trainer, master trainer of hypnosis, and is dedicated to helping people realize their goals both personally and professionally and lead a more satisfying life. So over the last 48 months, 130,000 people from over 40 countries have invested in David's award-winning, dynamic, and innovative online and in-room coaching programs. And yes, I am one of them. And you are teaching the 3 principles. And that's what you've been working with us, Billy and myself, in teaching. And that's the conversation that I want to dive into today with you. However, before we dive into that, I'd love for you to share your story, your journey as how you got to where you're at today so the audience can get to know you.
Sure. Well, but bearing in mind we have, around 30 minutes, I'll do a
Exactly. So we'll have the short
edited
version.
down version. Yeah, I'll give you the... Okay, so I got fascinated with personal development in my 20s. I bought a book called Grow Rich While You Sleep by Ben Sweetland. And Ben wrote that book in the 1960s. And I think I was attracted to the title because I was in my 20s, I was in sales, and the term grow rich while you sleep, I thought that would be a cool idea. And then I got the book and I started to read it, and it was about the unconscious mind. That's what jumped out at me. And I was like, I didn't even know what the unconscious mind was, never heard of it. And I became fascinated, and I went on this, my journey started, and in the early 1990s, I got fascinated with hypnosis. And I looked in the local yellow pages, would you believe that before we had the internet, I'm looking through the yellow pages for hypnotists, and I found this guy in Harley Street in London, which is sort of the place you would go and see an expert oncologist or a hypnotist to help you overcome a problem. And I phoned him up and he said, look, I can teach you. So I actually hired a hypnotist to train me one-on-one in Harley Street. And it was a 6-week program. I'd see him every weekend. And that was the start of my journey. So absolutely fascinated with that. And then I carried on with my work. And then a few years later, after training in hypnosis, I went through a sort of a personal midlife crisis, and I left the IT industry. I wanted to become a coach, and I started that journey, but I was really struggling and I needed some coaching myself. So I reached out to a local chap, and he said, why don't we meet actually at the hotel where we met, where we worked together.
At Hanbury
So
Manor.
his name was Paul, a fascinating guy. He was a master coach, master trainer of hypnosis, and master trainer of NLP. And he took me under his wing for 5 years. And because he said, look, I know you're struggling, but why don't you come to one of my NLP events? And I said, well, okay, I'll come along. And I went there the following week. And at the end of those, it was a diploma. Back then we had diplomas, 4 days. Then we had the practitioners were 20 days. Master practitioners were 20 days. It was the old school long form version. And at the end of the diploma, the 4 days, he said, you should consider training and becoming a trainer of NLP and working with people. I was like, I'm not sure I really want to do that. I just want to sort out the challenges that I'm going through. But he saw something in me that I hadn't seen in myself. And that was the start of my journey. And I did that for quite a number of years, 5 years with him. And then one morning he phoned me up. He said, I don't want you to work with me anymore. I said, why? He said, you need to go out on your own. You need to go out into the world and do it. It was like he was like a mother hen that kicked the chick out the nest, you
Yes.
know? And I was like, I don't want to go. I'm a bit scared about that.
However,
Yeah,
how beautiful, because it wasn't creating a codependency, right?
that's right.
He knew you were
Absolutely.
ready. Again, he saw something in you that you hadn't yet seen in yourself. And
Yeah.
I love that point, and I want to highlight it because that is the value of a coach. And I do believe everybody needs a coach, no matter where you're at in your life, what stage you're at. You need a coach, and those coaches will change from time to time as you evolve. However,
Yeah.
they get to
Yeah.
see what you don't see in yourself. And it's actually what Dr. Bruce Lipton said on when he was on my podcast, and he was saying that our programming has us in this tunnel vision. So we only see
Mm.
what we see based on our programming.
Yeah.
And it's
He
with
was like,
others, everybody else can see what we don't yet see. So that's beautiful that
that's
he
right.
kicked you out of the nest.
Yeah. He was like a mirror for
Right,
me,
right.
reflecting back. And I got to see things about myself that as you rightly say, I hadn't seen at the time. And he was able to reflect that back for me. And so I
Hmm.
went on the journey, set up my own practice. And then Dr. Tad James's PA reached out to me about 10 years later. And she said, oh, Dr. James has been watching you. I'm like, I've never spoken to the guy. Um, and I was really curious. He said, he'd love you to come over to Las Vegas and train as a master trainer in hypnosis. Now, I loved hypnosis. I love NLP, but I loved hypnosis more. Okay. If I had to choose.
Right.
So I got on a plane and traveled over to Las Vegas, and he was sort of saying to a small group, I think there were 8 of us, and he'd only trained since the 1990s about 7 master trainers in hypnosis. And I got to spend time with him. And I sat next to him on day one. It was in a boardroom, and he was right next to me. And he looked at me, he said, you're a healer. I went, what? No, I'm not a healer.
I'm
And
an
he
IT
really
guy.
said,
What?
yeah, I'm an IT guy just learning about hypnosis. But it was at that point that something resonated inside. And maybe, just maybe, all these coincidences and these teachers appearing just at the right moment to take me on the journey, like a hero's journey, when
Yes.
Luke Skywalker walks off into the desert after that trauma of his family's being killed, and Obi-Wan Kenobi appears and takes him under the wing. And that's effectively how I see my journey. I've had these moments that these teachers have appeared, and it was to sort of conclude how I got into the principles. I'd studied NLP and hypnosis. I was helping thousands of people around the world. And then I experienced a marital crisis. And I remember looking on my bookshelf thinking, I need to get a book on relationships because my marriage was going off a cliff. Okay. And I noticed I didn't have any. So I phoned one of my students, would you believe? Because a lot of my friends were saying, well, you should just, quit the marriage and then, just start again. And I needed to speak to a woman. I just had this calling. And so I phoned this lady called Nicola. She was amazing. So she said, you really want to read this book called The Relationship Handbook by Dr. George Pransky. And so I bought the book, I read it, and she phoned me a week later and she said, how'd you get on? I went, yeah, I'm not sure it made any sense to me, to be honest with you. She said, well, he's doing an online course and he is the greatest psychological mind alive, as quoted by Colin Wilson, the philosopher, cross between Albert Einstein and William James, who wrote the book, The Principles of Psychology. I was like, well, I'll buy the course because divorce is expensive, right?
Right. Of course, it's
So,
cheaper.
And the course was only a few $100. So I bought this course, and my wife came in and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm watching this guy talking about how the mind works." Because I had a lot of concepts and theories, but I hadn't I hadn't heard about these three principles that this um, psychologist was teaching, Dr. Pransky. And she sat down and said, "Can I watch it with you?" And we were on the second week of the training. It was only an hour a week.
Right.
And he was using a metaphor about how our eyes on a camera, how we experience life is through a projector inside our mind. And she was watching it, and she had a profound insight. To this day, we don't know what it was, but she just literally just woke up, and the feeling in the room changed instantly. I looked at her and she'd softened. She looked younger. Her voice changed, and she turned to me. She said, "We're going to be just fine." And my conscious mind, my
Beautiful.
ego,
Yeah.
I was going, "I'm not sure I understand what's going here." And anyway, I'm not even sure if I've decided whether we're going to be fine yet or not. But I couldn't deny the fact that the feeling in the room was just awesome.
Right.
So she said, "Look, I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed." And I went, "Okay." And I stayed up. And being an NLP modeler, I wanted to find out, did he hypnotize my wife on this video? So I'm rewinding the video over and over about 20 times. I couldn't find a technique. I couldn't find a strategy. I couldn't find a language pattern. I didn't know what had happened. You see, because I was looking in the wrong direction. I was looking at him, but what had happened, it was a shift on the inside for her.
Yes.
And it can't be described apart from that she just had a feeling and something shifted. So I thought, right, I need to learn about this. But it was 3 months later after she had that shift, and I was still frustrated. And I was watching these videos and I couldn't get it. I was very conscious and trying to work things out. And I'm in my kitchen. And all of a sudden, I'm making a cup of tea, and there's steam coming out of the kettle, and I'm pouring the water on the tea bag, and I'm just there in thought. And all of a sudden, I felt really cross, like angry inside. I was like, "Oh, I can't believe this is going on in my relationship." And I had a voice in my head. It came in and it went, "David, your wife can't possibly be making you angry. She's not even in the house. She's out shopping with the children." And in that moment, I had this amazing feeling. The anger just went whoosh, gone. And then tears of joy, laughter, the feeling came through. And I was like, it's true. 100% of the human experience is created on the inside via the principle of thought. The
Yes.
power of thought is so underrated. And it was at that point I was like, I need to go and find this Dr. Pransky and go on one of his programs. So I got on a plane, went to Seattle. He was running a professional retreat, just like Billy was on your business partner
Yeah.
the other week. And he was looking for volunteers to coach, and I put my hand up, and he chose me to come up to the front of the room, and we had a conversation. And during that conversation, all I can remember about it is he started talking about Muhammad Ali. I'm not sure what he was saying about Muhammad Ali or how we got there, but I had an out of body experience in that moment. It literally, it's like my mind switched off just for a nanosecond. And in that moment, I had another profound shift. And the only way I can describe it, because it's very difficult to use words to describe a transformation and insight, but the metaphor that I would use, and I have used, is that I realized that I've been living in a feeling of stress since I was 8 years old. In that instant, in a nanosecond, it was and dives that dive with sharks, the crazy people, they don't go in a cage, but they wear this chainmail suit in case the shark bites them and they can't get hurt. It felt like in that second, the chainmail suit had been removed from my body, and I just felt amazing. Stress just fell away in that moment. People were coming up to me in the break, going, "Oh my God, you look amazing. You look like 20 years younger." I was like, I just feel so good. And I hadn't realized that I'd been living in the feeling of stress and it had become my homeostasis.
Hmm.
A bit like people listening to this podcast might be wearing a pair of shoes right now and not realize they're wearing them until I mentioned it. And you know, you go walking all day and you get home, you take your shoes off, and it's like, oh, that's better. But until that moment, you don't even know you have them on your feet.
Right.
And I didn't know I had this feeling of stress. It had been normalized. So when it was removed or when I had this insight, I was free. And then
Wonderful.
George said to me, this is the third teacher that appeared. So Paul, Dr. James, and then Dr. Pransky said, I'd like to mentor you. And I was like, why? Well, you know, you're a bit of a maverick. And the world of psychology, unfortunately, innocently, are looking in the wrong direction. They're very much labels and pigeonholing and boxing. Oh, you behave this way, so you've got this condition.
Hmm.
And I was now on a journey with Dr. Pransky, and I have been. He's in his 80s now, amazing soul. Been mentored by him like 12 years, and I'm a couple of years away from 60. So still having a teacher. And
Yes,
I think everybody should have a coach, no matter, even if you're a master trainer. There's always somebody that can support you and guide you and help you. That's my
absolutely.
story, and I'm sticking to it.
I love that story. It is such a powerful story of learning and transformation and the power of thought. Because in each of
Mm,
those cases, even though he was talking about Muhammad Ali and you had no idea how he got there, it was
mm,
still triggering thoughts in you that resulted in
mm.
this insight and the stress being released from your body through
Yeah,
the metaphor that he was sharing with you. And
yeah.
I also wanted to share that as you talked about the world of psychology, putting people in boxes and labeling and giving diagnoses, etc., that
Mm.
was George's world too. He was known as
It
one of
was.
the greatest psychological minds on the planet until he learned this. And then he
That's it.
shifted his practice, and that's when his practice took off as well,
Mm.
because he was able to help people in such
Yeah.
deeply profound ways. And then
Yeah.
he had a mentor who you've introduced Billy and I to. And
That's
so
it.
I'd
Sydney
love you to
Banks.
share that. Yes.
Yeah. So I was fascinated because when George shared his story, it really woke me up to the potential of this understanding. It was so simple. Instead of intervening and trying to fix people, it was very much coming from a place of, oh, nobody's broken. And Sydney Banks was a, a normal guy with a ninth grade education who worked in a mill. He'd traveled to Canada from Scotland as a child. And in his 40s, he was struggling in his relationship. And he went to this conference on relationships in the 1970s. And he bumped into a psychologist who was also there because he was having problems. And they had this conversation, and the psychologist said to Sid, again, I wasn't there, so I'm just, this is how I remember it. Um, said, why are you here, Sid? He went, oh, you know, I'm very insecure. I'm very insecure, so I'm here to work on that. And the psychologist said, well, me too. And then the following day, Sid bumped into this psychologist and he was thinking of leaving the event because he didn't like the way that they were getting people to talk about their past and bring all their anger up and argue with your partner. It was some sort of modality that they were teaching the participants. And he said to his wife, I want to go. But unfortunately, the ferry wasn't going to be for another 24 hours. So they had to stay. And he bumped into this psychologist and who said to him, said, it's you again. I was thinking about what you said to me yesterday, that you were insecure. You're not insecure, Sid. You just think you are. And in that moment, Sid described it like a bomb going off in his mind. And all these beautiful feelings were coming into his world. And he didn't know what was happening. And he said to the psychologist, do you realize what you just said to me? And the psychologist responded, yeah, of course I do. I don't make small chatter. And Sid then describes it as he clearly didn't realize what he'd said because he had said that he was insecure as well.
Yes.
So Sid went home, left the island, went back to Salt Spring Island, I believe,
Hmm.
um, and for 3 days, he had all these beautiful feelings. He said he couldn't sleep. Just beautiful, loving feelings were coming in from everywhere. And then on the third day, he was standing in his living room, looking out the bay window across the lake. And he said his he heard his mother-in-law and wife having a conversation, and he started laughing. And he thought, well, I'm going to get into trouble because the mother-in-law said, "What are you laughing at?" And he thought, oh, I better not respond to this because I'm going to get into trouble. And he looked out this bay window, and all of a sudden he described how he was surrounded in white light. Nobody else could see it. No one could see it, but it maybe only lasted a couple of seconds. And then he turned to his wife, and his eyes were streaming, crying. And he turned to his wife, and his mother-in-law said, "I've discovered the true meaning of mind, universal mind. And people are going to be coming from all over the world to listen to what I've discovered." And some people said he discovered the true meaning of God. Okay. And it's not what you think it is. And his wife and his mother-in-law thought he'd had a break with reality and wanted to call the doctor. Because how could a ninth grade educated welder who worked in a mill for 14 years suddenly proclaim that he's going to teach psychologists and humanity about the nature of experience, the human experience? He'd had an enlightenment experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then George got to hear about it. Dr. Pransky, who was running a Gestalt therapy and had a full practice where he would take people back into the past, and he got to meet Sid because he heard about him. He went up to find out, what's this guy doing? Because people were going with troubles and struggles. Sid would just talk to them for free, about his discovery, and people would heal. People would transcend their suffering. They would find their mental health, which Sid said, everybody is sitting in the middle of mental health. They just don't know it.
Right.
So George went to meet him. And at the end of the talk, George went up to Sid, and Sid said, "Oh, what do you do, George?" He said, "Oh, I'm a psychologist." And Sid went, "Oh, I've never met a psychologist. Come back to my house for a cup of tea with a few of the people here tonight." And they went back to his home. And at one point, Sid leant in and said, "George, what are the principles behind your work?" And he described, well, we take people back into their childhood, into the past, and we look for the reasons why they're suffering with their stress and their anxiety and their depression in the moment. And this is how I remember the conversation. But so if
Mm-hmm.
you're watching this, George, forgive me if I've got it slightly wrong. But you said, "Oh, George, so it's like based on what?" He said, "Well, taking people back into the past," and he starts laughing. And George, I think, was a little bit irritated by this. He said, "What are you laughing at?" He said, "Well, maybe your training doesn't work, George, because the past doesn't exist. How can you take someone back into the past? Who taught you this?" "Well, it's based on Freudian analysis, the work of Sigmund Freud." And he was like, "Well, he clearly doesn't know what he was doing then in the context of the past. It doesn't exist. So we only have the now. We only have this moment. And everything we experience in this moment is coming from the principle and the power of thought flowing into your mind, right?" It's an impossibility that their suffering is caused from their childhood. It's caused because they're misusing the power of thought against themselves innocently. They're not aware that they're doing it. So going from NLP and techniques and hypnosis, which was really helpful for people, to just educating clients to say, if you could just see that you're sitting in the middle of perfect mental health, and you just have to wake up, and you have to wake up to the power of and the gift of thought that you've been given at birth, and start using your thinking in a way that's healthy as opposed to unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I heard about this. I went to meet George, and, here I am teaching thousands and thousands of students this understanding. And the stories of transformation are it's miraculous. It really, really is. It's so simple. Wake up, Realize that you're perfect and all your suffering is created via the misuse of the power of thought. That's it. And it's
And
not intellectual.
and I love that because it is so simple. And yet, a, we're not taught this in school, etc., just like we're
No.
not taught the power of hypnosis and the unconscious mind or anything about that in school either.
Mm,
And so we go through life with our childhood programming,
mm,
doing the best we can with the resources we have,
yes.
and living life as it happens to us in many cases, rather than how is it happening for us, and recognizing that our thoughts impact the life that we create.
Mm,
And that's the power of this. And yes, it is so simple. And people think it needs to be complicated in order to heal, or it needs to be hard in order to heal. And the reality is it can literally be this simple.
mm, yeah.
And I love that. And the power of thought is part of a trinity. It's the three P's that you talk about.
Yeah.
So I'd love you just to share that connection of
Sure.
the three P's, knowing that the foundation really is in the universal mind. It's in thought.
Yeah. I mean, Sid would talk about one principle, but that was so simple yet really complicated for people to get their head around. So they came up with the three principles. I believe it was George and Sid, and broke it down to make it easier. They're called the Trinity. So mind, universal thought, or you could say divine mind, divine thought, and divine consciousness, which are the same, but let's try and make it simple for people, okay, by complicating it. So we have consciousness. Um, the real simple way of describing that for me are the senses. So
Mm-hmm.
we have the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, we have our senses. And the senses are neutral. They have no agenda. They're just there, neutrality. And what that consciousness or the senses, when a thought comes into our mind, whether it be a memory from, our database of memories, or a new thought comes out of the blue into mind, we wouldn't have any awareness of that without consciousness. The senses bring thought alive,
Mm-hmm.
giving us our emotions, giving us our feeling experience. And so consciousness brings thought alive, but without divine mind, another way to describe that would be energy.
Mm-hmm.
Without life force energy, we wouldn't have an experience. So we need the three working as a trinity together to have a human experience. So if we took a doctor, for example, and we went into a morgue and I went, "Hey doctor, what's the difference between me as a human being alive and that person's that dead?" Well, the person's physiology that's lying in the morgue is exactly the same as you, David, apart from they don't have any life force energy.
Right.
You cannot have a bad day if you don't have any life force energy. It's
Right.
what's causing your heart to beat right now without
Yes.
you even thinking about it. Okay. We're not plugged into the mains and yet we're here living and breathing. So we need life force energy. If we had no thought, if we took thought away from a human being, they wouldn't have an experience. They wouldn't know it's a good day or a bad day because the senses wouldn't be able to bring anything alive for you. So we need the senses, we need thought, and we need life force energy. That's the trinity. And when you educate your clients, when you point this out to your clients in collegial conversations with them and go, all you're experiencing and all you're suffering is just thought. It's not anything other than that. And if you could just learn to not be afraid of what you're experiencing in terms of your feeling state and to see that the nature of thought is really what we need to understand. The nature of thought is just like transient, like a cloud. It comes and it goes. But what we innocently or with a misunderstanding when we're living without the awareness of how the system works, when a dark cloud comes in, a really powerful thought with misery attached to it, the feeling of sadness overwhelms us, and we try and think our way out of it. We need to just step back and recognize that, oh, nature will just take its course. It'll leave in a minute. You might have another one and another one, but if you step back from your thinking and thoughts, you will just find a better experience because it's what's behind the clouds is the blue sky. And human beings are the blue sky, metaphorically speaking. They are not the clouds that come into their mind. The blue sky is perfect mental health, and the thoughts that people have are just getting in the way of them finding that experience. And, what I didn't mention is that what happened with George, talking about Muhammad Ali and using metaphor, maybe a metaphor, but what actually happened in that moment, my mind went quiet. So it's not thinking more, it's thinking less is the key to finding mental health. It's
Right.
quieting the mind,
We're not trying to think
finding
our way
peace of
out of
mind.
it.
Yeah, because
We're
you're going
quiet.
in the wrong direction. Yeah,
Right.
you
And
can't think your way out of
you
it.
have a beautiful analogy about the quieting of the mind as well that Billy and I love to use now, and that's the snow globe analogy.
Yeah, I used to carry one on my desk. I think it fell off and broke. I need
Oh
to get
no.
another one.
Well,
Yeah,
everyone knows what a snow globe looks like, and I absolutely love it. If
that's
you
it.
shake it up, you've got all the
Yeah,
snow, all the beautiful snows flittering down, except
yeah,
that it's like a whirlwind inside the
yeah,
snow globe, which is how
that's it.
most of us are living every single day with this whirlwind of thoughts going through our mind.
Yeah, most people on planet Earth, especially people are stressed, and then what happens is they go and trying to work out, oh, I'm not feeling great, so I need to think a way out of feeling stressed out of my mind. So they keep shaking the snow globe, and they don't understand why they have no clarity. And
Right.
I would say, what you need to do is put it down, just
Yes.
let it settle on its own. That's all will happen. That's why people meditate,
Yeah.
because they want, or why people go to church and pray. They want peace of mind. And what Sid, the enlightened gardener, as I call the enlightened man, Sydney Banks, his book, one of his books was called The Enlightened Gardener, actually, um, would be just to get quiet,
Hmm.
to get present. He would say, us helpers, change makers, people who go out in the world and want to help, we're effectively wanting to get people present, get them into the moment, even though the paradox is we only have the moment. We always only have this moment. But a lot of people are up in their head thinking about their past and what happened yesterday and their childhood and why they're suffering today, or they're worrying about what's happening tomorrow or the future. So when you're doing that and you're up in your head, you're not present. So if we can get clients present and in the moment, as George did with me for the first time in years, I found peace. And I hadn't found that before because I didn't know that that's what I was doing inside my mind. So through education and guiding people back to the now, they find their mental health. Getting them present is like putting the snow globe down.
Exactly.
And when the snow settles, they have clarity.
Yeah. And it's also creating the space that we need for those insights to happen, the
That's it.
downloads, versus trying to think our way out of the solution and
Yeah.
creating the worrying. We just need to get present
Yeah.
and get that clarity and create that space. So it's beautiful. I love that. And you created an amazing meme. And I would love for you just to describe it because we have both audio and video here. I would
Okay.
love for you just to describe that meme. And
Sure.
if
I've
you
got a
have it
picture on the
there,
wall.
oh yeah, if you have it there,
I'll just
show
take
it
it off the wall. It's
for
just to
the,
remind me. So I don't know if you could see that. Case, my wife drew it just in about 2 seconds. She said, "Oh, I'll just scribble it out for you."
yep,
So what I have here is a cave mouth, and coming out. So this would be where it's like a spiritual space, and that you just imagine you can't go into the cave, but what's flowing out of the cave is a stream. Okay, and it's a stream there,
yep,
and that stream is carrying stuff down it. It's like lilies and flowers. Beautiful. It's a metaphor for the stream of thought that comes from this spiritual space, and it's flowing down this river. And for those of you who are listening, there's some emojis that like, the emoji poop. Okay, there's a few of those in there. So that would be like the nice flowers. That's a beautiful thought flowing into our consciousness. And then the unpleasant thoughts, the emoji poops. Now, we are the observer of our thinking. It's like we're standing on the riverbank, and some people get down on their hands and knees and pick up the emoji poops and smell them and go, oh my God, this is a terrible experience I'm having. If we can just educate our clients that there's like, don't get down on your hands and knees and pick up those thoughts, just let them float on by. When they float on by, you don't get wrapped up in the negative experience. Even if you're feeling bummed out for the day, that's only the thoughts flowing through your mind. You don't have to do anything. If you just step back for a moment and let them take their course, nature will just take them away from you. You don't control what comes into your mind. You can't control thought. It has its own nature, comes and it goes. That's why when someone comes, I'm depressed all the time, I say it's an impossibility. Or I'm anxious all the time. It's an impossibility because the nature of thought is that it changes. Well, on its own, it's like we are living in our own weather system. And some of us are living in a rainy weather system, like in the UK, most of the time. But we know that the clouds will part at some point in the
Mhm.
day and the sun will come through.
Yes.
We don't need to stand outside and take a deep breath and try and blow the clouds away.
We just allow them to flow. And I love that.
They'll
Again,
leave on their own. Yeah.
again,
Nothing needs fixing. You're
yeah.
working perfectly okay.
And
It's
it's
just that you're not enjoying it.
right.
And if you stop thinking about it and trying to manage it, nature will take its course and you'll find peace of mind at some point, a lucid moment where you feel peace. And that's the evidence to say, oh, my mental health is there, even if it's temporary, even if it's for a second.
Because
And
once you
that gives
know it's
hope to
there,
people.
then exactly there's hope, and that you know that you
Yes,
can extend that second into a minute, into an hour, etc.,
that's it.
by choosing to get
Yeah.
present and live in the now and allow the thoughts to pass on by instead of bending down and picking up those nasty, negative, poopy thoughts
Yeah, that's it.
and
Yeah.
camping in them.
Yeah. And when you get present, those thoughts don't bother you. It's like you might still have your challenges in life, but instead of them being in your face, those thoughts right in front of you, it's almost like they move into the background. They're still coming through. Like, I'm a human being. I've been around this understanding. I still wake up some days and go, oh my God, I feel terrible today. And I know what's going on. But so many people don't understand what's going on. So they go, oh, there's something wrong with me. I need to go and fix it. When I wake up, I'm having a moment. I've lost clarity. Maybe I've drifted out of my lane like the average bear. It's like hit the rumble strips on the freeway. Oh my God, life's falling apart. And then I remember, oh, I've just had a drop in my mood. I'm in a low mood, and the quality of our thinking in a low mood is not as healthy as the quality of our thinking when we're in a good mood. And and everybody on planet Earth can relate to a moment when they've had a bad day and they've gone to bed, woken up in the morning, and they feel better again, and they didn't do anything.
Exactly.
The mind just changed on its own.
And it's a new day.
It's a new day. Yeah.
I love this conversation, David. It is so powerful. And for people that are just hearing this for the first time, you might be thinking it can't be that easy. And we are both here to tell you that it literally can be that easy if you
Mm,
allow it, if you choose to
yeah.
get present and you choose
Yeah.
to allow those thoughts to move on by. So,
Mm,
David, I love to ask all of my podcast guests a question. And that question is, what does "don't wait for your wake up call" mean to you?
You know, what comes to mind is a metaphor that was shared with me on my journey with Dr. Pransky, and then many other teachers in this community who were mentored by Sid. And it's this: we are the leaf being blown in the wind, thinking we're in control of where we're going. And if someone's listening to this podcast, this was your moment to not wait, to look in a perhaps to look in a different direction. Instead of looking outside of yourself for solutions to personal challenges and negative experiences, look in a different direction. What if you could, right now, maybe go and search the YouTube in, look for an interview with Sid Banks, or just look in a different direction. Look inside, look to the nature of your experience now, because this was your opportunity. You don't need to wait. There's nothing to work out. You've actually already got this understanding inside, you just forgot.
I love that. Thank you. And if somebody would like to work with you, reach out and find out more about your work, if you can let the audience know how they can get hold of you, your website, etc., that
Sure,
would be wonderful.
sure. Hey, they just need to go to the website, David Key, as in door key, Key, David Key, one word, .com. And on there's a contact us, and you can go in and you can submit a question, or reach out to me. It'll go to my support team, and they'll just let me know and leave your details, and I'll reach out to you.
Beautiful. Very easy. So simply davidkey.com.
That's
And
it.
any last word of wisdom for the audience as we wrap up this show?
Yes. Everybody listening to this right now, I want you to please remember you're sitting in the middle of perfect mental health. You just forgot. You came into the world perfect, uncontaminated, and then you had life experience, and they're just memories. They can't hurt you, even if you've had trauma and you're suffering from them. If you do allow yourself to step back and allow nature to take its course, a bit like if you cut your hand, you don't need to do any work. Your physiology will heal that up all on its own. The pain will eventually subside, and then you'll just have a scar. Or you could take the opposite approach, which wouldn't be wise. You could pick at the scab day in, day out. That will speed up the healing process. Psychologically speaking, it's designed into your DNA. Your psychological healing will take place if you stop picking at the scabs, if you stop thinking about the past and all those challenges, and allow the thoughts to flow in and flow out. When they flow out, a negative thought, even if you don't know what it is, it will heal. Now, you may have another one, and that will heal if you just leave them alone and trust that you've got that innate wisdom inside. There's nothing wrong with you.
I love that. So profound and quite ironic too, because I was on a call earlier this morning where one of my colleagues picked a card, and the card for today literally said, "You are not broken.
Wow. There
You
you
don't
go.
need to be fixed," which is what you've said here today. So clearly, that's an important message for the world today. And I want to thank you so much for your time, David, for coming here on the show, for sharing your wisdom, and for all of the support that you've shown to Billy and myself. We love
Oh, you're
you
welcome.
and love working with you. And I just want to say thank you so much.
Oh, I love you too, Melissa, and Billy too. I mean, I'm just honored that you decided to come on a journey with me. And Yeah, I can't wait to see what you create in the world and how you make an impact and change people's lives with this understanding and all the other work that you do in NLP and hypnosis and coaching and timeline therapy. It's just what the world needs right now.
It is, and it is our honor to be able to offer it and to be able to do it with your guidance. So thank you. And I
Hey,
want to
you're welcome.
thank you, the listener, for tuning in today. And hopefully you've experienced some profound insights and learning just from listening to what David has had to share. And I encourage you to reach out to him if you would like to learn more, and to also share this episode with others who in your life that you know need to hear this message today. So thank you for being here, and come right on back next week for our next episode. I'm excited to share with you a new program in 2025 that my training partner Billy Admi and I are launching. It is taking place in Q1 2025, and it will bring you to a master practitioner level of NLP, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy, and NLP results coaching. And what this means is with this level of training, you will be able to guarantee your client results to them in writing. And no one else can do that as a coach. So it's very powerful. Throughout the 90 days, we won't be working together daily. However, we have trainings every week. You will be meeting your unconscious mind, designing your destiny, learning self-hypnosis and higher self-hypnosis, getting a 3-day designation in the Krasner style of hypnotherapist and start working with clients right away. Then we go into our 8-day practitioner level training of NLP, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy, and NLP results coaching. And we end with the master practitioner level of those 4 modalities as we continue to build your skills. Everything builds on itself all the way through the program. On the weeks that we don't have trainings, we have student check-ins, office hours where you can come, get your questions answered, and get the support that you need going through these programs. These designations are valid in 40 countries around the world, and all of this work is done on Zoom live with lots of experiential practice for you to be able to feel comfortable with the techniques when you complete the trainings. And lastly, because we teach it to you on Zoom, you can then go out and work with your clients on Zoom, which makes for a very low startup cost for you to literally be able to start working with clients immediately upon your successful completion of the training. For more information, check out the link in the show notes below.